relationship cure. That's going to be our new series. Is it just me, or has there been a lack of connectedness in today's society?
Oh, yes.
Oh my.
Yep. The more people try to connect, it almost seems the farther away we get, isn't it?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, if you stop and think about it, we're always connected to something now. We always have something pulling at our attention. We have smartphones with endless ability for people to call us at any time of the day. We have social media accounts, Instagram, Facebook, Snapchat, Twitter, where we're always waiting for that next notification of somebody seeing something from our life happening. We're constantly being barraged by connectedness. Yet, however, it seems like the more we try to connect using all these different ways, the less we actually are. We have email, old-fashioned email, because, it takes too long now for like instant messaging because email's so slow. Sometimes we even get a lot of cards and letters, but all these different ways to connect that's available to us, and yet, as a society, we are now connected less than we've ever been. Do you have the thing for me? All right, we're at the point.
Don't think they got it out of the box.
All right, go ahead to the next slide. This past year, at the beginning of the year, God has shown us that our theme for the year is grow. Our theme this year is grow. And there's 4 main focuses we are paying really close attention to. First, the G. We have been gifted, not just for giftedness' sake, not just to be the best of the best, but we have been gifted for what? Service. Service to the King and service to others. We're not about ourselves. God has gifted us for service. The second part that we're going to focus on, which is where we're headed today, is relationships matter. Relationships matter. Then the third portion that we're going to be looking at this year is only believe and obey. Only believe and obey. And then we're going to wrap up the year with witnesses for Christ or of Christ. We are witnesses of Jesus. We're not doing it just to try to earn a badge, but we are actually telling people what God is doing. That's our 4 main focuses for the year, and that is what God is wanting us to focus on. It's our time to turn our attention on relationships. The very fact that we're called sons and daughters of God indicates that God is a God of relationship. That's exactly right. If you look back in Genesis, God fashioned man for relationship. He created us first to have a relationship with Him, but then at the same time, He's created us to have a relationship with each other. That's the way He fashioned us. That's the way He created us. In our relationship, sometimes your tallness doesn't come in good effect, does it? Yeah. Sometimes it's good to be short. Not really so. I say that with all love. It's funny now. But God's created us for relationship.
Amen.
And yes, it's primarily with Him first.
Yes.
Then others. Our relationship with Him is going to impact every other relationship that we're in. If we are struggling with our relationship with God, our relationships are going to be impacted negatively. If our relationship with God is growing stronger and closer and stronger and closer and stronger and closer, we're going to find that He's going to teach us how to have better relationships with those around us.
Yeah.
Amen.
Since God has created us for relationships, wouldn't it be great if relationships were always easy? Yeah? Yeah? Wouldn't it be great if our relationships never had to be worked on?
Right.
You wake up every morning, hi honey, I love you, have a cup of coffee. That's an inside joke. We're going to have to go to counseling for that comment.
That's funny.
Wouldn't it be great if every single relationship we had, Jeanette, was full of peace and joy and there was never, ever any conflict?
It will be.
It will be? Yes, in heaven. No.
In the Lord's kingdom.
Yeah.
That would be great, wouldn't it? If every relationship you were in, the person next to you was always nice to you. and you were always nice to them. Or that we never argued about anything. Or that, you know what, I don't like the way you did this, but it's okay. We're going to work this out. But relationships aren't like that, are they?
No.
No, don't lie. I mean, come on. Y'all work with me here. Your relationships are not always like that, are they?
No.
No,
Thank
it'd be more.
Thank you. At least exactly. They're not. Why? Because we live in a sin-filled world. Our world is broken. It is absolutely impossible. Everybody say impossible.
Impossible.
For everyone
Right.
to agree on everything all the time.
Yes, you're home.
It is impossible. I had a pastor, I love him. Pastor L, one time, I remember this even when I was a kid. Him once saying that if there were two adults in a marriage and they never argued, then one of the adults didn't need to be there. Right? It's true though. We're not going to see this world the same way all the time.
That's right.
And see, there are going to be arguments. There is going to be conflict. We as believers need to learn how to handle and resolve our conflicts constructively. That's the key. Conflict handled poorly has the tendency to pull things apart and bring destruction.
Right.
Conflict handled constructively and correctively can actually make our relationships be stronger. Why? Because we learn to talk things out, we learn how to work together, we learn how to attack the problem and not the person.
Amen.
We've got to become people who know how to handle conflict correctly. So as I was getting ready today, I came across an interesting article about conflict resolution. It was really neat. It stated how most people handle conflict, and then what was the best way to resolve conflict. And I kind of like to share some of the truths that it had. All right? First of all, let's look at how a lot of people will resolve conflict. First, some people will withdraw. You know these people. Anytime there's a fight that comes on, they kind of like run and cower, and they're like kind of passive aggressive. They're not going to address the issue, but on the side, they're going to act one way. You know, I ain't going to talk to them for another week or so because they made me so mad. Do you think that this is a good way to handle conflict? Being passive aggressive and not handling the issue?
No.
Yes is not the correct answer. When days come twist on my young one.
Patty
It's
one.
not.
I like Patty one.
Exactly. That's what I was thinking about. But it's true. Withdrawing from it and acting like it never happened is never a good thing. Eventually it is going to come up. Eventually you will have to deal with it, because if you run from your problems, they have a tendency to get bigger and bigger and bigger. God has not called you to be a coward. God has not called you someone to just let problems go by the wayside. God has called you a warrior, and you need to learn to address your problems. You've got to learn to stand up in conflict. So you can't be one of these people. You can't be someone who withdraws from conflict. Jesus never withdrew from conflict. Jesus spoke the truth in all situations. We're called to be like Jesus.
Yes, amen.
Next one. Some people fight. This is not addressing the conflict. This is being a loose cannon and letting every emotion, every idea that goes through your head come out your mouth and let God decide who's right or wrong. If they're dead, oh well. Do you know people like this? Don't point at them. And do not elbow your spouse if they're here. It probably is. Yes.
Sometimes that's me.
Well, eventually you can, yeah, to an extent. But this is just the way most people. You know these people. If anything goes wrong, they are coming at you with a vengeance. And they're going to hurt you because you might have said something that offended them. And they're going to just let their words dice you and slice you. And if they kill you, it's going to be your fault anyway. You shouldn't have done it. I'm going to the extreme, but you know some people that are like that.
Yes, they are. Seen it too often.
Only problem is sometimes aren't we like that too?
Yes.
Yes.
It's like, don't go there, Pastor, don't go there.
Very good.
Yeah. So there's a second one. You have withdrawal, just gonna run away from it, not deal with them at all. You have the passive aggressive ones. You know what? I'm just gonna treat you like this. You have those that are gonna fight. They're gonna say whatever they want. They're
Right
a
or
loose
wrong.
cannon. They're gonna blow you up. You have other people that are yielding. What do I mean by yielding? Oh, they know they've been hurt, but they're gonna stuff it. And they're just gonna push it down, push it down, push it down. And you know what? They're just gonna, I may be right in this situation, but I'm not gonna address this with them because you know what? Peace is more my issue than the fact of us dealing with this. So I'm just gonna let them have what they want and I'm gonna push it down.
That's
You know
like
the problem when
me.
you push it down, eventually it's gonna come out.
Yes.
Think of like a Coke can. If I have a Coke can, or even better yet, a Coke bottle, and I shake that thing, 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 eventually that pop is gonna pop off and it's gonna go everywhere. And it's all gonna come out. And one day you're gonna leave your socks, or your spouse gonna leave their socks somewhere, and you're gonna yell at them and let them have it. And it's not about the socks. It's about everything else. It's about something from 2003.
That was the last
Once
one.
again,
That
I will be going to counseling. Actually, yes.
Funny,
I'm on
funny,
speed
funny.
dial. No, I'm joking. But these people's stuff, and what's sad is sometimes it doesn't come out verbally,
Right.
like an explosion. Oftentimes, the people that stuff it, they have physical symptoms. They'll start
Sure.
becoming sick because God did not create us to carry that anger, the bitterness, the resentment that comes from stuffing. And that is usually what happens to us if we stuff our emotions down.
Mm-hmm.
We become sick.
Yep.
It can mess with our minds, our mental health can go down,
Yeah.
our physical health can go down, all due to the fact that we are too cowardly to resolve the conflict in our life. So now that I made you all happy, let's look at what is the preferred way of conflict resolution.
Deal with it. What?
The best option is to deal with it and compromise. The best option is to deal with it and compromise. Do you know that sin grows in darkness, right? When something is brought to light, that's when it can be dealt with.
Exposed. Yes.
You must learn to bring conflict to light. Let's talk about how we can deal with it and compromise when an offense or conflict is happening. Hopefully you're taking a couple of notes. I have quite a bit of scripture along with the ideas that this particular article said. First, we need to adopt, which way, that way? We need to adopt a learner's position. What do I mean by that? Verse for this could be Proverbs 12:1, in which it says, "Whoever loves discipline loves knowledge, but he who hates reproof is stupid."
Oh, wow.
If we value the relationship, we need to humble ourselves when conflict comes along. We need to look at the situation and see what can we learn from this, instead of so much of worrying about are we right, are we wrong, right, bring it back. You may learn something to the fact about, for example, like if you're married, you might learn something about your spouse. You might learn something about yourself in this particular conflict. Or you might learn about a situation. We must come to every situation with the attitude of we can learn from this. We can learn from this. This particular conflict is not going to take us out. It's actually going to make us better. Heather and I have experienced this firsthand. There have been times in our marriage where, unfortunately, I do the whole stuffing and I'm not going to say anything. I was a yielder. She was the loose cannon. Right?
Yes.
And the situation would come up. Eventually we get to the point of where we dealt with it, we would talk about it, and you know what? I learned a lot about her. That it wasn't, for example, a cup of coffee, because I used that earlier. It wasn't the fact that I didn't bring a cup of coffee that morning, the reason that made her angry. It was the fact she really just wanted to spend time with me. That's a big difference in connotation, isn't it? That's why she's angry. She just wants to spend time with me. Oh, I learned something. I learned that she likes to spend time with me, and I learned that I was stupid.
No.
Because I thought it was something else. I'm joking. But at the same time, you see, it's a learner's position. You have to be humble enough from the get-go to realize, okay, we can learn from this. Second, another response, we have to learn to listen with our heart. We have to learn to listen with our heart when a conflict comes up. Before I read the verses, how many of you, when there is a conflict that arises, when someone comes up to you and says, this is not right, do you automatically start listening to what they say so you can come up with a good response?
Sure.
I'm going to listen to every word you say so that way I can hear any inadequacy in your argument and I can blow you out of the water. I've done it. I ain't gonna lie, I've done it.
Mm-hmm.
I've even had my own daughter say, I don't like to argue with you because you always win.
Ah.
And it's not because of the great wisdom God has given me, it's because I learned to listen for any illogical twist in their argument. Notice I just said argument. Instead of listening with my heart, what is really going on under the issue? What is causing this particular attitude to rise up in them? You have to learn to listen with your heart. Let's look at these verses. If one gives an answer before he hears, it is folly and shame. Proverbs 18:13. So if you're not willing to really listen, you're acting like a fool. I didn't say it, God did. The ear that listens to life-giving reproof will dwell among the wise. Proverbs 15:31. We must learn to listen. Not just to the words that are said, but what are the emotions or attitudes behind the words. Does that make sense? So we have adopt a learner's position. Listen with your heart. What's another step that can help us to respond? Keep your emotions under control. A lot of times, guys, we can't do this ourselves without the Lord's help.
Right.
We have to ask Him, help me. Help me not to get so angry when someone says something I don't like. Ephesians 4:31. Let all bitterness and wrath and anger and clamor and slander be put away from you. You have to put it away if you really want to respond. If your emotions are all crazy, you're not going to respond the correct way. You have to put it away. And a lot of times that only comes by asking God, help me to respond in this situation the way that I need to. Will there be anger there? Yeah, there may be. Will there be bitterness? Hopefully you didn't allow bitterness to come yet, but if you have to deal with something that's been undealt with for a long time, there may be there, but you're going to have to deal with it. And you have to bring it to the surface, and you have to keep it under control while you're talking. You may be that loose cannon, but you're going to have to let your anger come back down before you ever yell. Which goes right with our next point. Adopt a learner's position, listen with your heart, keep your emotions under control, think before you speak. Growing up, you might remember it. Remember our clubhouse behind that house in the bank? I had a sign, and I loved it. I wish I still had it. It said, load your brain before you shoot off your mouth. I loved it. It had a gun on it. It had like a little pistol.
Yeah.
You remember that one?
Yeah, I do.
I love that one. Load your brain before you shoot off your mouth. Oftentimes when we have a disagreement, we answer our response quickly. We hear what they say, we shoot back. We get angry, we shoot those words out fast. Look what the Word of God says. We have Proverbs 12:18 and Proverbs 15:1. First, Proverbs 12:18. There is one whose rash words are like sword thrusts, but the tongue of the wise brings healing. So if the tongue of the wise brings healing, what does it make you if you run that's thrusting with swords? Proverbs 15:1. A soft answer turns away wrath, but a harsh word stirs up anger. In other words, it makes it bigger. Sometimes if we stop, take a deep breath, we've asked God to help us with those emotions, we breathe, and then respond, we can bring healing. And then the conflict can be dealt with. But if we just respond, usually it makes it worse. Isn't it kind of interesting? So basically, God's telling us to go slower. Think about it. Listen. Be willing, open enough to allow the other person to say what needs to be said. Trust that God's big enough to handle the conflict. God, help me not to feel like I have to fight for myself. Help me to think about what they're saying, what's coming from their angle, and then respond appropriately. Which takes me to the next point. We focus on our part of the blame. How many times in conflict, I'm guilty of this sometimes, how many times in conflict do we not take the blame for it? Or at least part of the blame? Well, because they acted this way, that made me do this. Heard that, Hannah? Because we'll say, because Caleb yelled at me, that's why I threw something at him. It's all Caleb's fault. I'm using y'all two just because. Okay?
Yeah.
I've already thrown myself under the bus, and I'm kind of tired. I could do this so much more with me. But we need to stop, and we need to look at this, and we need to ask ourselves, did I play a part in this? Is what they're saying really true? Did the way that I act in this really bring offense to them? Let's go back to the whole thing with the cup of coffee. You know what? It is partly my fault. Even though I was using that from earlier, let's just go back. Let's say it is my fault. Let's say, you know what? I have neglected spending time with her. That is my fault. That's not her fault. That's my fault. Even though, well, you know what? That whole fight started because they didn't understand that I was doing this. No, let's take it further. It's part my fault. We need to be strong enough to say, you know what? I do play part of this relationship. It's partly my fault while we're arguing. Then you can ask God to help give you wisdom on how to fix it. And finally, the last step. Oh, I'm sorry. The verses for that. I forgot to tell you the verses. Proverbs 12:15. The way of a fool is right in his own eyes, but a wise man listens to advice. And every way of a man is right in his own eyes, but the Lord weighs the heart. Proverbs 21:2. A lot of times we always think we're the right one. We always think we're the right one. Sometimes we are. To be honest, sometimes we are. Sometimes we're not. And are we willing to look at our life strong enough to see if we are or we're not? If we are, okay, we still deal with the conflict. If we're not, that's where we need to apologize for what we've done. And the final part of the conflict resolution, adopt the learner's position, listen with your heart, keep your emotion under control, think before you speak, focus on your part of the blame, and finally, keep short accounts. Verse for this, Matthew 18:21-22. Then Peter came up and said to him, Lord, how often will my brother sin against me and I forgive him? As many as 7 times? He thought he was doing good. Yeah. I forgive that person 7 times for the same thing. I'm pretty good. And Jesus says, no. Jesus said to him, I do not say to you 7 times, but 77 times. And other translations say 70 times 7, which would be 490 times for the same offense
In one day.
in one day.
Mm-hmm.
What is he saying? He's saying we must forgive. We must forgive in our conflicts. Remember, there's other verses that Jesus said, if you don't forgive others, your Father in heaven will not forgive
Yes, amen.
you.
Mm-hmm.
That's pretty intense. That is pretty intense when you stop and think about it. So, what am I saying? Conflict is inevitable. It is inevitable. If we deal with it incorrectly, it can tear us apart. It can break us up. It can make us sick. It can mentally torment us. It can keep us from becoming all that God wants us to become. But if we can resolve our conflicts biblically, if we can put ourselves in the shoes of others and learn from them, if we can learn to listen with our heart and not think that we're always right, but willing to go, you know what? I hear what you're saying and you are right in this. If we can learn to attack the problem and not the person, those very conflicts can cause us to grow closer and closer together. Hopefully, we're willing to do that. Hopefully, we're willing to do that. And I do want to remind you, we cannot do it in our own strength. Because remember, every relationship we have is directly impacted by our relationship with God. We're going to have to come to Him and say, give me the wisdom in this. Help me to know what to say. Help me to show that forgiveness. Help me to show that love. And help me to see life from their eyes. Amen?
Amen.
Let's pray. Father.